So I think when you consider things like geography and you talk about population sizes, social media really grandized moving away. It really grandized moving to larger cities, which then became a little bit of a haven and I think a better dating pool for a lot of people. And I say haven more so because obviously there's more resources, things like that. People started making more money. We know the six-figure standard that kind of became like the marker of success over the last couple of years. And so, I do question whether or not people in LA and New York have better social lives and have longer friendships. And so, a lot of people who are scattered throughout the United States in smaller populations, what would possibly make better partners? So, things people look for, such as like education. And so you have factors that would make for great partners, right? People are looking for those who have the similar education level. And I don't think that that always means institutionalized education. I don't think that people are always really hyper fixated on the level of agreed degree attainment. But I do think that people are typically looking for people who are just as equally, intelligent as them. And that doesn't mean that you have to be extremely smart, but people are looking for things like shared values, how this person conducts themselves in person, in certain settings. If this is someone who's professional, right? How do they show up at the Christmas party? Like just breaking it down on a very like minuscule scale. I do think that people are typically looking for people who have some level of education in regards to etiquette, mannerisms, and how they conduct themselves throughout the world, because we know that this person is eventually going to, or may potentially be a role model for our children. At least we should be thinking that way. So I think that plays a huge role. And then I also think when you take away things like people meeting in person, right, Christmas parties, things like that, because of COVID, I don't think a lot of companies started back up after that, right? What a lot of companies actually did was they implemented and they started sending people, work from home. So where we used to go to relate and have discourse and we would just get to know people, because I do think that relationships in the past were a little bit better when we met people in person. And typically they say we do marry those who are, local. But I think that when it comes to like work and things like that, when we're not meeting people at work, it may take a little bit longer for us to warm up to this person if there's not really a shared interest. Versus like if you meet someone at the bar, then it's like it takes a little bit longer to kind of form somewhat of a bond because you don't know this person. And then I think little inklings, right? Like we don't know this person, we don't really have that tendency to give them the benefit of the doubt because they have no track record, and that's a smart thing to do. I think that that's a very wise and healthy thing to do in regards to our relationships. But I do see how these factors play a huge role in why people are lonely. You know what I mean? And so what would be a space where we would go out and meet people at work and things like that, that's no longer a thing. That's completely eradicated. And then when you start talking about salaries, inflation, the economy, things like that, a lot of people are going back to school, choosing, careers in tech and things like that. And a lot of times those high paying jobs are in larger cities. And we just know that larger cities foster larger salaries anyway. There's more opportunity, there's more resources. And so a lot of people are kind of like migrating out, and so what's left within the smaller cities, which, I know it's not a large population, but they make up the population. I think sometimes when we think about geography, we think about statistics, when we even think about just the world and any discourse that we're all having on a global, or not, let me not say global, but on a cultural level, we really only tend to consider things like larger cities, right? That's because that's where most people are. So it's like we don't really take into account people who are in Utah, Arkansas, you know what I mean? People who are in Daytona Beach, Florida. You know what I mean? We take into account LA, New York, you know what I mean? And that's kind of like you know what I mean? Chicago, like that's kind of like where we, oftentimes like those are usually our markers, in terms of like statistics and things like that. So I just think that's something to think about, especially as it relates to dating. Okay, thanks for listening.